Welcome back to another episode of Living with FASD. I'm your host, Patti Kasper, bringing you both professional and living experience with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. This is a educational and human interest show for those living with the effects of prenatal brain injuries caused by alcohol exposure, their family and loved ones, as well as anyone else wanting to learn more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. This week, I am so blessed to have two lovely guests on, one of whom you will already know from having been on some episodes before, Dr. Susan D. Rich, child author and child psychiatrist in Maryland, and her intern, Fatima Iqbal. I hope I didn't
Yeah,
butcher your
that's got
name.
it.
Yes.
Oh, no,
So,
not at all.
so you guys have been hard at work on a project, and I'm so excited to have you on to Living with FASD so that you can talk about it and maybe be an inspiration for the people in our audience that might want to do something similar where they live, because this has the potential to be so powerful.
Well,
So,
thank
yes.
you, Patty. Yeah, thank you. And, Fatima and I have been working on this project. We kind of reignited our Better Safe Than Sorry project, which I had started all the way back in 2014. We did a big campaign here locally in Potomac, Maryland. So 10 years ago, the year that I founded my nonprofit, Seventh Generation Foundation, we actually went together with the local high school students at Winston Churchill High School, and we did a very large focus group on 1 day a week. I would go over to the high school and meet with ninth graders through 12th graders who were in this big focus group. And we developed a campaign called Better Safe Than Sorry Project, which I then launched a blog. And we did a multimedia presentation at the end of the school year for all 500 graduating seniors going off to their jobs and workplaces and college, to teach them about the fact that alcohol causes problems for developing fetuses even before you know you're pregnant. So it's not just worried about once you find out you're pregnant stopping alcohol. It's the fact that because much of the problems start as early as late third to early fourth week post-conception, and in males up to 3 months prior to conception. So the male sperm are epigenetically modified even 3 months before conception. So this was before our local school system had condoms that were distributed in the nurse centers, which I was already a proponent of. And what we did, we went together with, sorry about that, we went together with Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, and we did a little condom wrapper, which went on the condoms that they had donated. We would put the condoms here with a little sticky glue, and then this would become a bookmark after using the condom, and it has a lot of information on it. And this was the same little logo we used for our blog, which is Better Safe Than Sorry Project. We also have a Facebook page, which is Better Safe Than Sorry Project. You can go on Facebook /Better Safe Than Sorry Project. And that was in the middle of me writing my book, and had founded the nonprofit. And then we went on and did, the blog for a number of years, for about 4 years till 2018. And we interviewed a lot of authors like Mary Green, who wrote When Rain Hurts. We interviewed Bonnie and her husband, Bonnie Buxton, and Brian Philcox. They came when they came for the FASD United annual conference. It was then NOFAS annual conference. And, we did a number of other little things, like at the Barking Dog in 2014, when right after we launched the blog for FASD Awareness Day, we actually put up a little display in all the bathrooms, and we had young people like Miss Fatima, who were already 21, to go in to help put in those displays. And then right outside the barking dog, the owner, who was Catholic, believe it or not, let us have a display with our condoms to talk about the fact that if you're pregnant or planning to be, you need to avoid alcohol, and you need to actually contracept if you're using alcohol. So Fatima coming on board, and Fatima, I'd like you to tell them a little bit about who you are, and
Mhm.
the audience, and like how you came to be interested, and like maybe a little bit about what we've been doing this summer with our local uh county council to do
Mm.
to get the alcohol signage issue, and why, and I can pipe in whenever you need me to.
Oh yeah. I came across her post on Nextdoor, where she was just looking for a intern to help around the farm, and because it was something that I hadn't done before, I just thought it would be a really good opportunity to, do something new and be outside. But I was so kind of enamored with the way that Dr. Rich spoke, and how much kind of like wisdom like flowed just about holistic. And I learned so much about how the mental health crises have like, and how how much things in our daily like life have impacted that. And
Mhm.
then we kind of got onto the topic of alcohol, and she had told me about this project, and I was really really shocked to hear about how so many of the stuff like she was saying sounded really concerning to me, alarming, but also like I was 20. I was like a couple of weeks away from turning 21, and I hadn't known any of the any stuff about the contraception, about how early onset it can affect before you even know that you're pregnant. I read her book. I went home my first day with the condom wrapper, and I think like from then on she reignited the Better Safe Than Sorry project, and she told me about how much of a relationship she had been building with these county council members, with all of these politicians. And now that she's been reaching out back to them, um, informing them, we get paragraphs and paragraphs of the basic knowledge, just to have like as a document of like they know, like they have the information and they can't claim ignorance. And I've just been seeing how that process, how kind of difficult it is. Like she has been met with a lot of crickets, and that is really, I'm a politics major from the University of Maryland, and I'm seeing kind of on the other side of how it looks like when the reality of these neglected communities and these neglected issues. And uh yeah, you've gotten a response from just not like, well, I just know that like the amount of times that you phone called and emailed, you haven't
Yeah.
gotten even like a meeting set, so
Yeah. So
it's definitely.
exactly. And Fatima just is downplaying a little bit her role in reigniting Better Safe Than Sorry, because it was really as a result of this 20-year-old going to 21. And I actually have a daughter who's 20 going to 21 this month, um, who has known about this for all the years. And they went to the same high school together. They graduated a year or two apart. But my daughter, when she got to her health class, Patty, she took health at Winston Churchill High School, and the health teacher actually told the class that it's okay to drink alcohol in the latter part of the pregnancy. He was a millennial, okay? That it's okay. The baby's almost formed. It's ready to be born. The last trimester is fine. And I am 100% sure that it's because his millennial wife told him it was okay. And when he would say, well, wait, what's up with that? And she'd be like, no, it's fine. The baby's almost ready to be born. Like, I could only imagine their conversation because of all of the misinformation out there.
Mhm.
Even a lot of OBGYNs are saying it's okay. So here I had this young woman who then reminded me that she didn't know anything about it. And she's about to be this is Fatima, about to be a senior
Mhm.
in college at University of Maryland studying politics, philosophy, and economics. It's like one of these majors that involves a lot of really important societal issues. And here she was about to graduate. Now it heightened my kind of, I guess, fervor again. Not that I've ever been without it, but it made it so that I was like, okay, well, girl, you got to get back to work on better safe than sorry. And then I remembered, as I looked back, that our last post was like maybe 2018 on my blog, and it's through WordPress. And so I had I had even let anything but the WordPress, lapse, because you have to keep paying for the websites. And I was like, well, I'm just going to let it lapse because, I've got a lot going on with the farm. But what Fatima was letting me know is that, look, why did nobody tell me this? I'm about to be 21. I'm about to be drinking. And then I remembered my daughter having texted me in the middle of her health class, Mom, the health teacher is saying to all the 30 kids or plus 30 kids in the classroom, plus his 5 or 6 other classes, I'm sure he said the same thing. So then instead of what I had done years ago in 2014, 10 years back, having, really encouraged those young people to know that this was a problem, and the then principal of the school being very on board with it, then we've had like 2 or 3 principals since, and this information is gone. And so then we figure, okay, well, what about our local county? So Fatima and I were talking, and I said, well, over the years I've tried, I sat on the alcohol and other drug drug abuse advisory council, which is called AODAC. I was voting physician member appointed by our then county executive, which we've had then a change of hands in county executives. But I sat under the county executive, Ike Leggett, and tried to advocate for signage where alcohol is posted, that it is a problem if you are pregnant or planning to be drinking alcohol. And if you are using alcohol, according to the CDC's 2005 advisory, you need to contracept. Well, just like when the CDC tried to reactivate the 2005 warning, to contracept if you're using alcohol, which, by the way, came on the heels of my documentary with Dr. Kathy Sulik, Dispelling Myths about Alcohol-Related Birth Defects, funded by
Which is very good, by the way.
Yeah, funded by the CDC, and you can find that on YouTube. But the 2005 warning came out, on the heels of that documentary coming out in 2001, and really emphasized the fact that if you are pregnant or planning to be, to avoid alcohol, which had been said all the way back to 1981 in the original Surgeon General's warning, which eventually became adapted to the 1989 warning labels. And I talk a lot about this in my book, but what didn't happen is saying that if you are using alcohol, you need to be contracepting.
Yeah.
Now, why this is important is that a lot of women don't even find out they're pregnant until 8-9 weeks pregnancy. 50% of pregnancies are unplanned, and 13.5% of childbearing age women, I'm saying really high school all the way up through their 40s, when they could potentially have a child. 13.5% of childbearing age women binge drink. We're not even talking about the young men. So we're not even talking about the epigenetic sperm modifications or anything like that. Tailgating, we're talking about like football games. We're talking about any type of political event you go to, any fundraiser for even no fast is going to have alcohol sold. And by the way, FASD United, I don't know if they still do it, but they were taking money from alcohol to have a little bit of sponsorship for their annual events, which we're talking about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder United. It'd be a little bit like me as a physician taking money from big pharma, which I'm not allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I stepped off that board. Why I stepped off AODAC after a year and a half, again, the Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Advisory Council under Ike Leggett, was that we went to the Liquor Control Board. AODAC did. I, as prevention chair, and my co-chair wrote a letter. AODAC signed off on it. We sent it to the Liquor Control Board for the county saying, hey, they needed to look into this. And guess what happened, Patty?
Got shut down?
No, they came back and they said, you know what? We don't have any authority to do that. They're the Liquor Control Board, Patty. We don't have any authority to do that, and we have no money for it, even though at the time they were getting $37.4 million in profit from the sales of alcohol. And I know that because I was able to trace, because I was on AODAC, I was able to trace the money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now here we have an intern, Fatima, who is a rising senior in politics, philosophy, and economics. It's called PPE. So I said to Fatima, knowing all of this, downloading to her, telling her, you have to read my book. If you want us to really do this, you're going to have to get educated about this. And the book is like a Cliff Notes version of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so she started reading it and she's like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this not being promoted in the schools? Like, and I said, well, in fact, they're even giving misinformation in the schools. And this is Montgomery County that sells its own alcohol. Go ahead, Patty.
That you just circled back to a point I wanted to ask you, because you do not hold back if there's something that needs to be said. And I can only imagine that you have shaped your daughter to be the same way. How did she handle that in the classroom?
She was sickened, like nauseous, but she's the type of person, unlike me, like I was the heckler. I would sit on the front row. All of my teachers loved me. I was the brown noser. I was the, staying after class, asking questions that I knew the answer to just to like be friendly with the teachers, because I loved school. I loved it so much that I just would stay after school just to be at school. I loved it. I did not like middle school at all, but I loved my teachers, and I want to get into the toxic environment socially of our local public school, because that's a whole nother level.
Well, I think, and
so
any parent who advocates for their kid brushes up against that toxic environment because it's everywhere.
Well, and it's not just a parent advocating for the child, because I think that that's a whole nother level, Patty. And you not ever having children, you sending your child to a Henry Ford factory model of education. And unfortunately, that's what I, bought into, and I did it. It means that there is toxic social stuff going on where, and that's a whole nother level, but where the girls dress exactly alike, they wear the same hair, styles, the same makeup. If you're any way different than that, that's a big problem. But having said that, I can tell you that I'm not going to speak to how my daughter handled it. What she did is she texted me, and she's just like appalled that this is happening. And she's watched over the years everything that I say and do, because I've taken my kids to Vienna, Austria, to the International Congress on the Law and Mental Health. They see my talks. They've seen me speak in China at the World Gene Convention. They saw me speak in Toronto at the Children's Aid Society, and in London, Ontario at the Child and Parent Resource Institute in London, Ontario. I mean, I've taken them to farms,
Yeah.
that do the same type of thing my farm does.
Yeah.
In Canada, in North Carolina, we're going to a farm in Costa Rica coming up. So it's not that my children are unaware. They're just
Oh, yeah.
not the
Yeah.
in your face about this issue. My daughter's issues, she loves environment. So since a tiny little age, so she's very much vocal about the environment, which I too, that's kind of like a,
Mhm.
it's the womb as an environment versus our external world, which Fatima can tell you, I'm very much into that. And that's what I do with my Green Care Farm Animal Sanctuary. But having said that, going back to this issue with Montgomery County, the issue really arises because our county is one of maybe a handful, if even a handful. It may only be Montgomery County, but Montgomery County is one, it's like a zebra or a unicorn. It, since the end of Prohibition, has regulated and owned all of the liquor establishments. So they are the instead of it being at the state level, the ABC boards, which you might have heard about, the Alcohol Beverage Services or Alcohol Beverage Control, they had for many, many years and still do. They own all 20 of the liquor stores, and anything that would sell, let's say, liquor products or alcohol products have to be licensed through our county, not through the state. So our county is kind of like a red herring. So in order to get our state, which we're only 9 in the whole nation that have no laws on the books about alcohol and pregnancy or promoting awareness about it, I now know that there are 25 that have signage. I understood that there were 41 states in the nation that require alcohol signage, but with Fatima and I going back and looking back over all of the research and publications out there, it looks like there are 25 with signage laws, and there are 41 with laws of any kind about alcohol and pregnancy. Okay. But of our state has the ability to be an example for this issue because we were one of 5 states that took on big tobacco and won. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is it's different in our state because if a county in the state, and really one of the most affluent counties in our state, if not the most affluent, is Montgomery County. We're a bedroom community of Washington, D.C. A lot of the people who work in D.C. live in Montgomery County. A lot of the people serving on our local county council have at one point either worked for presidents or been in the state senate or are on the way to the state senate or even to be governor. Many of them have run for governor, for example. Now, having said that, you take a step back and you say, well, why would you need to pass anything in Montgomery County to be able to get it passed at the state level? Well, that's because you can't have something going on at the state level in all of the state except for Montgomery County, and then Montgomery County not passing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then everywhere but Montgomery County will be required to have signage, but Montgomery County won't. And that doesn't make sense. So I got the good advice of my political mentor, which is Senator Brian Feldman, who was one of 2 people. Our current lieutenant governor was the second person who put our state bond bill to get the state bond bill for our farm, our nonprofit Green Care Farm Animal Sanctuary, 501c3, where we got the state bond bill to redo all the pasture fencing so we could adopt and get additional animals here that were rescued and injured and that type of thing. And then we got a county grant of $50,000 matching funds to redo all our buildings and make them more habitable for the animals and suitable to have children come and interact and participate in the programming. So Aruna Miller and Senator Brian, so now Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller, was a representative in our state at the time in 2017-18 when we proposed this bond bill. And she and Senator Feldman's a very dear friend of mine. He had told me all these years, look, Susan, if we're going to put it through the state, you have got to get it done in Montgomery County first. Yeah. And he's not a Montgomery County, politician. He's a state. He's our local state senator, right? For my district.
Yeah. So where does that stand now?
So where it stands, Patty, is that Fatima and I have, as she mentioned, I've been sending emails and phone calls and, doing everything I can to even get a meeting with these different people. And who I've heard back so far is Council Member Jawanda, who is his staff, at least his HHS staff, has been in touch with me. I haven't been able to get a meeting yet, but I've sent them volumes and volumes and volumes of information where they can see the CDC's recommendation. They can see all the alcohol signage issues in the country. They can see even our county council executive, who had, by his own words, said to me at a fundraiser for Gabe Albornoz, one of the county council members who has visited the farm right before our renovations. I went to a birthday fundraiser for him and saw our county executive there, Mark Elrich, who was then running for his second term as county council executive. And he said, yes, Susan, by all means, come by. I will help you with this. And what I'm getting after sending loads and loads and loads of information that could be equivalent to a dissertation worth of data, they came back to me and said, well, I wonder, have you reached back out to, okay, one of them, and I can't remember if it's Councilmember Jawanda's person or him, which I had already stated in my original letter, I was on AODAC, the Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Advisory Council. They said, well, we have this thing called AODAC, and we have this thing called Alcohol Beverage Services. Have you been in touch with either one of them? And I'm like, girl, I sent you the email and the response back we got from the Liquor Control Board. I sent you the letter that I wrote on behalf of AODAC. And then right before, getting that one, or after, I got one from our county executive's representative saying, could you please send me examples of legislation that have been passed in other states? And so I promptly said, yes, you can see this below, but in the meantime, don't you happen to have a paid employee up underneath you through Health and Human Service that you can ask to do this research? Why are you asking a citizen, a private citizen, who's not being paid by the county to do this?
The burden is not on you.
It should not be on me.
The burden is not on you.
It is not on me. So Fatima, you tell her how you see this, because this is you just turning 21. You're a county, resident. You're a voting. I'm saying Gen Z girl. You are epitome of Gen Z. You are Gen Z, and I'm Gen X. And of course, Patty, I hate to tell you this, but you're a boomer.
I know.
You're a boomer, but I'm Gen X, and I say, let's stand up. And so what do you say about this, Fatima?
Well, hearing, first of all, about how much, not just the direct profit that the county takes from alcohol, but just how much control that they have over licenses, that they can't feign ignorance. They can't feign that it's like, the local liquor stores. I see about College Park, the campus. If you've ever been there, it's kind of a nightmare with how cramped and everything is. But they've still managed to fit about like 5 bars, 6 bars, all on like one strip. And that's only in my kind of range alone. So being around that and knowing like, okay, I know that like, I didn't know this until I was 21. I know that the people that I grew up with when they were drinking, if I drink, I just vomit immediately. So I couldn't if I wanted to, but I had been around that culture for so long. And I know how like it's not these kids' fault, but like kids are going to do what they have done for decades and decades and decades. And Montgomery County knows this. And I think I just found it so much more predatory than before. You know, it's not like that they're making a profit off of these kids. Like they know that these kids are going to harm themselves, their bodies, and God forbid, you know, if the amount of like unplanned pregnancies that we have, well, now you've just harmed another like life. And I've seen from all of Dr. Rich's work how many areas this extends onto with FASD, with how private prisons profit off of it, with just the foster care system, and like hearing about the adoption stories where you know it's these kids that have the undiagnosed FASD, and these parents don't know, they weren't informed or anything when they adopt these kids. Just
Right.
seeing how much it bleeds into literally like our own community, like our own citizens, and knowing that like Montgomery County is not stupid. They're not, they've clearly have all of Dr. Rich's email. She makes it sure that like you don't, like you never not know around Dr. Rich. Like you can't ever be stupid around her. Like she will make sure that you know. So I think I've just found it like so just my, I just feel really angry for kids in my generation, because I feel like I'm like, well, we are just playing directly into their hands, and so many of us don't know, and we think that drinking is a way of kind of rebelling against a little bit, but I don't think that kids my age know how much the industry is profiting off of them and like relying on them and preying on them. And that's what makes me really upset. So yeah, I think her Dr. Rich's fervor has definitely rubbed off on me. And so I've made it an intention for, you know, how can I bring this to College Park when I go into the fall? You know, how can I can go into bars now. So I can go in, we can try to see if we can get signage there. But yeah, I think I'm just really happy that everything's aligned like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're, you know, just being sensitive. We have 22 minutes left in our hour, and it's very easy for people to complain about the systems, especially if it's a government system, because there is such a perceived powerlessness, right? And that's been coming across loud and clear. But what I'm hoping we can do is infuse people who are watching or listening with hope that all things are possible. Um, you know, you've made inroads before, Susan. Um, you know, what are some things that people can do to try and see where are things in their local communities? How can they make a difference?
Well, I mean, at risk of putting people down rabbit holes, which I've been accused of by people in the past, I'm not going to do that, Patty. I'm not going to tell them what they should do in their local community, because we have a very different set of circumstances here in Montgomery County. I can tell people what I'm doing, which I'm happy to do, but I'm not going to give any advice to anybody else, because that's not what I'm here for. I
Mm.
don't feel like. And I do understand that you're about empowering people to have hope, but the problem that I've seen over the 32 years that I've been working on this issue is that a lot of people spin their wheels and spend a lot of time and effort where it does not need to happen, because you're not going to get anywhere. And here's my thing is, if they're not going to do anything here in the county, then what I have right now is a PPE major that has been taught at University of Maryland, one of the very prestigious public universities in our nation. She's a PPE major. she's been taught how to pontificate and to write in ways that, it just goes on and makes a point philosophically about an issue. So she and I are now going to write a paper to help people understand what this issue is and how here in Montgomery County it has impacted. Now, it turns out there's this thing which a lot of people may not know about called Google. And we can do it as a Google Doc and push it out on the internet. We can do it as a document that we send in to some of the the newspapers, which you may or may not have heard of. There's one called Washington Post, which is local, and then it has a fairly broad reach. And I know I'm being facetious. And then there's another one called the New York Times. And then there's yet another one called the New Yorker. So it depends on the bandwidth that Fatima has. But remember, she graduated among the top in her class at Winston Churchill High School. She's going on to University of Maryland, studying this really broad field. And right now taking 2 summer classes in addition to her internship with me. Girlfriend is bright. And girlfriend, when she and I write this paper, are going to send it out to all these outlets. If we get traction, we do. If we don't, we put it on Dr. Google. And then everybody gets to benefit from what we've written without me just sitting there telling you, you must do this in your local community.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, you can only tolerate about 1% of my passion in your body. Okay. It's a little bit like the X-Men. And I know this because I wouldn't want to infuse any of my passion in anybody else, because it's like, anything else, it's going to be, it's going to make you either frustrated or implode or explode, and I don't want that for people because they got their own lives to live. So that's the thing that we're going to do. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm writing my second book. So this is very much going to be a part of my second book, is really what it's going to take to get this dirty little secret. It is the silent epidemic, like I wrote in my first book, but it's still silent, girl. And my book came out in 2016 when my master's thesis came out in 1995, and then 96, I was given the North Carolina Governor's Institute on alcohol abuse, substance abuse, alcoholism and substance abuse. I was given a public policy scholarship to write a policy statement for the state, which I did. I just look back on that even, and I say, okay, well, what's happened here in Maryland? What's happened nationally since? I did a strategic plan for no fast all the way back while I was a medical student in 1998 about this issue. I went back and gathered data, from birth certificate registries in DC, and showed that it's 68% of the Caucasian women who are continuing to drink alcohol in pregnancy have more than a college degree, more than 16 years of education. Whereas the African-American women, around 68% of them, and this is 1991 to 95 data. Remember, I did this study in 98. Around the same percentage of them have less than a high school diploma. So it's the undereducated African-American women, the overeducated Caucasian women that aren't getting the information. And like Fatima said, you have college campuses that have a duty to warn all these people if they're allowing liquor stores to be right on the outskirts of it. It's just like a reservation that has, is a dry reservation, but right on the outskirts of it are all these liquor stores. Okay. So what can people do? I don't know what they can do, to be honest, but they can do more than nothing, and they can do more than be complacent and shut down and demoralized and, diminished. They can rise up, they can wake up, and they can realize that this may have happened to their own child without them knowing. And instead of getting all guilty and shameful, they need to then go back and bring accountability to the place that needs it, which is big alcohol. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
big alcohol happens to be in your backyard owned by the county, then that county needs to start being accountable. And okay, you may say, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to come over there and arrest you for expressing your freedom of your First Amendment right? Would they do that here? I don't think so. And I'll tell you, I'm not afraid, you see,
Mhm.
because there's a Susan Rich, and I told you about her before, Fatima, here in our county that took on the county in 2003 and sued them. She did not win, but it was the whole point of the thing. Another Susan Rich, believe it or not, she's in her 60s. She took them on for animal rights issues because they were letting people tie their dogs in the middle of the summer in the back of their yard and not do anything about it. And she would chase down the animal control people who would come to those homes, and the people would say, oh, the dog is fine, the dog is fine. So she would chase them down in their cars and, in her car, and, to confront them about it. But why I'm telling you this is that, this issue is specific to Montgomery County because Montgomery County owns the liquor stores,
Yeah.
and they're the ones, which is different than almost any state in the nation, where
Yeah.
you have to go at it from a state level.
Because I grew up in Pennsylvania where we had the state-run liquor stores. Although you could get, and they had beer distributors, right? But there was nothing in the grocery stores. There is now. I mean, it's changed somehow since I moved here to California. But coming here to California was so weird because there's not just cases of beer, but you can get hard liquor at the grocery store, and it was very disconcerting. And certainly with the county that I'm from, there's a lot of issues I would love to butt my head up against. But I think one thing I would tell people is exactly to echo your statement, Susan, about don't spend your energy where you're only going to be spinning your wheels, but be smart
Right.
about it.
Right.
And take some time, do some research, and figure out, if I'm only going to do one thing, what should that one thing be?
Right.
And then
Right.
go at it full bore.
Full bore. And that's what I have reignited myself to do with Fatima's, when I say encouragement, it's her presence as my intern, where I'm having to mentor her on an issue. And whereas she is out with me 2 days a week or more often, helping with the animals and like turning our horses out. If I happen to be away in the evening, she'll go out and turn the horses out to the pasture. Um, she is also learning my way of doing it, which isn't necessarily the way she's being taught in
Mhm.
college, because she was telling me about some of these people who are coming in as policy people. My master's is in health policy and administration. And she's Fatima, you can tell her a little bit about what you have been educated by these people coming in to talk with you, where they say, oh yeah, my boss says to send an email and I have to send these emails and it just seems like it's going nowhere.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I was really worried when I was taking my classes because I was like, I I think I realized I was like, it kind of sounds like nothing is getting done. And um we had a policy maker, she works in that field, come in and speak to us, and it wasn't about here's what we've been able to get past. Here's what we do about like learning about these issues, talking to the people like on ground like level, trying to figure out like how did we get in this mess? How do we get out? It's all just about like she says, pontificating. It's a lot of like just writing memos. They're teaching us how to like write memos instead of like, I didn't know you could literally just like email your council member, try to get a meeting, try to how to actually get in front of a person and like tell them to like stop wasting time. Um, so yeah, I feel like I'm learning how she's making like the inroads, and that to me is more inspiring than learning kind of how to play that game, because I feel like the inroads is where I'm seeing she'll go to like death row. She's been able to, you gave a testimony that passed what was it? His name, I'm blanking
Oh
on it.
yeah, so the Cameron Cardin Act, we were able to get passed here in the state this legislative session. I say we, I had very little to do with it. I did go and testify, and I wrote a letter on behalf of the Cameron Cardin Act, which I testified, I think, last legislative session, which not this past, but in 2023. It might have been 22, but it finally got passed this year, to say that if you have a mental health condition and are having a crisis and need to withdraw from your classes at one of the state universities, that you can withdraw and get your money back. And because this family who had reached out to me through a very dear colleague of mine, an adult psychiatrist, this family had the son move back to the state to play varsity football. He was, a champion in his high school, and he got drafted to a college up in New Hampshire or one of the New England states. And then his name's Cameron Cardin. And then he was kind of like drafted, and I don't know what you call it, but recruited to Salisbury University here in the state, and had been called so many racial slurs and had felt just so terrified by the whole experience. People writing the N-word everywhere where he was going into a class, and he had to leave because he'd never been around that before. And they eventually, his parents tried to get the money back from there, because it's huge amounts of money that parents have to pay for college. And I know that I paid my own way through, 3 degrees. But these parents were trying to get their money back and couldn't, because they said that they had no evidence, no grounds for, his medical withdrawal. And so now they're, we have that law in the state, and it's not that I don't know how to do these state things. It's just that I'm very, I'm kind of like a one woman issue, or one issue woman, in that, like, I feel like prenatal alcohol exposure and related issues that people don't know about are why I'm here. Even though I'm a child psychiatrist, like, what I do a lot of my free time is figuring out how to push forward, not just this issue about signage, because, signage is a big issue, but how do we pop the proverbial bubble of deafness and silence about this issue? There are plenty more issues out there that we need to get public awareness about. And really, that's what my next book is about. It's going to be Dirty Little Secrets, and just how we have all these dirty little secrets. And the oldest and biggest dirty little secret, guess what? This whole issue of prenatal alcohol exposure. It's the oldest and dirtiest little secret. It goes back 10,000 years to the very earliest settlements of humanity, which were to grow grain, believe it or not, to ferment the grain as grain alcohol. Okay. And they did it all the way back in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And I've written about this in a more recent article from last year on green care farming, just, to help understand that our earliest roots of farming, even in agriculture societies, were to grow grain alcohol. And then more recently, Patty, you had, and this is a spinoff maybe for another time, but you had told me about a book that somebody has written as like a parody on that topic, that, all of our society was built on alcohol. But, that is like a really terrifying, kind of concept to me.
I couldn't finish reading it.
Yeah. And I don't even want to promote awareness about that book. So I wouldn't even give the time of day to it. But I'm just saying to you that,
and that author was from UBC and, University of British Columbia, where there's so much work being done with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and it never came up.
Well, so that's where I believe, Patty, that what you have to understand is there are there are eugenicists
Mhm.
out there that all the way back to the earliest, and you and I have talked about this before, but the eugenics movement of the late 18 early 1900s, where Charles Stockard of Cornell
Mm.
University
Mhm.
said, just let alcohol flow freely to the masses. It
Mhm.
will basically extinguish the lower races. And
Mhm.
his article, Alcohol as a Factor in Eliminating Racial Degeneracy,
Mm.
came out in 1924, which is now, it's in the American Journal of the Medical Sciences, is now called JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association. But people don't want you to know about that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
That's
So I know that you and I have talked about that before, Patty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
um so that will, when I post these on YouTube, I will often pick and choose previous episodes for people to click to. So I will be adding that little click feature for our previous discussion where we did talk about that community 10,000 years ago, where we did talk about Stockard's work, um, because it is important information.
Mhm.
But we do need to wrap things up. I'm so grateful for our conversation today. It's a little bit of a different spin than the usual topics. But what I'm hoping is that everyone listening and watching um, will maybe figure out what can I take from this? Where, if Susan and Fatima are passing me a baton, and I take that baton, what am I going to do with it?
Mm.
What fight am I going to pick up? How can I improve things for
Yeah.
those of us who are living with FASD? And that's the really encouraging thing that I found in all the interviews that I did for my book, Sip by Sip Candid Conversations with people diagnosed as adults with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, was that for most of us who did not find out until we were well into adulthood that all our quirks and our struggles had a biological basis, right? Rooted in prenatal brain injuries from the alcohol exposure. Most of us pay it forward somehow. We get involved in advocacy one way or another. So what I'm hoping is that our conversation today will just inspire people to keep plugging away. There will be times where we're going to be feeling like we're butting our head against the wall, right? And you mentioned, FASD United, and how many times have they tried to get legislation passed in DC? And it's got to be that butting your head against the wall kind of feeling. Um, and it, and I know it can feel very discouraging. But I also see that we are potentially heading that place where things are, where we're going to hit a tipping point and things will
Yeah.
change.
Yep. Yep.
And,
Yep.
and we just have to keep the faith and working toward that tipping point, because when it happens, it's going to be big, right? And they found this out with the smoking, going up against big tobacco. It seemed like it was never going to happen until it did. And
Mm-hmm.
big alcohol certainly did learn a lot of lessons and gird themselves up against that, but their turn is coming.
Well, and to be fair, Patty, I was at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill doing my Master of Public Health when all the tobacco industry, when all that came down. So I was able to be a part of, like, at least the bird's eye view of seeing how that unfolded, because I was a public health student at the time. And it turns out that 5 states in the nation did sue big alcohol and won. And Maryland was one of those. They still get payments back from big alcohol. Now, I'm going to tell you that there is a conundrum here. And it's the elephant in the room that's pooping and peeing and everything all over Montgomery County. And that is the big problem, is that our county owns and distributes its own alcohol. So who's the state going to sue in that case? They going to sue Montgomery County? I don't know. And then if you look at the reason that they sued, believe it or not, and I learned this again through, my education, was that all of the people who were on respirators and ventilators and for emphysema and COPD and all of the consequences of the smoking, that the states were then up under financial pressure because they were paying for all these people to be in ICUs and CCUs and have the respirators and the ventilators and being at home oxygen and all of that. That costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was way more than the federal Medicaid paid for. So the states then had to bear the cost. So at the end of the day, that's how they got the suit through and how they still get money back from big tobacco. So the question now becomes, it's a duty to warn issue. It's a consumer protection issue. And you can put the link to my article on that. It's a consumer protection and the alcohol industry's duty to warn. Okay. And here's the issue is that it is a tipping point because not many people know about it. Whereas people, CDC is now saying, and the World Health Organization, no amount of alcohol is safe for anybody. It's a neuroteratogen, it's a teratogen, it's a carcinogen, it's a hepatotoxin. It's a mutagen. It literally is like formaldehyde, because actually the byproduct that's highly neurotoxic is acetaldehyde. Okay. And if you look at that as an aldehyde, it's like formaldehyde. So we're literally, anybody who drinks is literally how do you say, pickling yourselves from the inside. This happens to the little babies, but over time, like, it causes brain problems for adults. It's linked to certain forms of dementia. It's linked to a lot of, like, over 440 chronic medical conditions for the children who are prenatally exposed. And, we know all of this. So like, what's the tipping point going to be? Well, I'm going to keep talking about it because that's what I do. And maybe I come across as crass and like uneducated. I have 28 years of education. I'm sorry I have a little bit of an accent. If that's a problem for you, just have your AI read it back to you, in a monotone voice. That's okay. But I'm still going to continue talking, and I'm going to continue trying to get meetings with people. They may not be happy about it. And I'm going to try to push this legislation with Fatima, as long as she will be a part of that. We'll walk arm in arm into the thing. Look, here's a Gen X, here's a Gen Z. This is what we're saying. And it's not just the two of us. Like, there are many other interns who've worked with me over the years who are now PhDs. They're masters of social workers, and there are other people who can echo what we're saying, that if you're pregnant or planning to be, you need to avoid alcohol, which is according to the CDC, and you need to contracept if you're using alcohol. So better safe than sorry.
Regardless of whether you're planning a family, you need to contracept.
Well, you need to contracept because you may not be thinking you're going to get pregnant. But did you know, Patty, that 16.8% of pregnant women between and I'm talking about fully pregnant, between the ages of 35 and 44. This is doing the research that Fatima had recently been doing. 16.8% of pregnant women are continuing drinking in that already high risk age group. And so I know a lot of people would say, well, why are they still doing that? Well, a lot of them have misinformation. You get a health teacher telling kids when they're, in high school that it's okay to drink. Well, what do you think these women who aren't even in high school are being told?
And that was something that when you brought that up, much earlier in the hour, that's something that came up in my most recent conversation with Kenneth Jones, that there's a lot of providers are running with the fact that with other drugs, the last trimester appears to be safe. And so it's just kind of generalizing that to alcohol as well, but we know that's not true. But a
Well,
lot of
yeah.
providers just haven't gotten the memo.
Well, even for SSRIs, we're now selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, we're now, you know, starting to see the outcomes of the children who are affected. So, you know, not saying that we're going to have to take a lot of women off these medications, but we have to say, well, why are the women actually having to be medicated in the first place? And
Mhm.
is the stress of our daily life and our daily existence so bad that we end up having to be on high potency medications,
Yeah.
especially when you're of childbearing age, a childbearing age woman? Like
Yeah.
if you're planning a pregnancy, your life should be like rainbows and unicorns,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm just saying, maybe I'm not being realistic, and maybe people would say, well, how dare you say that? And maybe people even in my own field, but I have seen children, especially where they're twins, where the woman has had in vitro fertilization to begin with to get pregnant. And
Mhm.
then she's put on antidepressants during that pregnancy and ends up with children who have autism and other kinds of problems, maybe related to the in vitro process, because we do know there's evidence that shows that that can be a problem for babies, but also the fact that we're using these SSRIs fairly indiscriminately.
Mhm.
And so yes, it's alcohol and it's, you know, other drugs, and not necessarily, I'm not trying to split hairs, but I want to cut the Gordian knot is what I want
Yeah.
to do. And I want
Yeah.
to just cut to the chase and say
Mhm.
alcohol's a neuroteratogen, it is a
Mhm.
teratogen. We have
Mhm.
got to have it moved up the list of things that
Yeah.
are talked about
Yeah.
in our society. And for
Yeah.
Gen Zs who are now entering their childbearing age years, we need to start with them. And
Yeah.
that's who my next book is for, is the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas. I figure the
Yeah.
millennials are way past the point where they're even going to hear this.
Well,
So
Yeah.
I'm a baby boomer, but I'm anxious to read it.
good. Well, yay. Well, it's going to be
Yeah.
directed toward the Dirty Little Secrets, will be directed toward the younger generation
Yeah.
so that it will uplift them and motivate
Yeah.
them, because believe it or not, 80 to 85% of Gen Zs do believe, according to the research, that they can make a difference. And I do believe they can. I meet with a lot of them on a
Yeah.
daily basis. I
Yeah.
do believe in them. I have two
Yeah.
children, Gen Zs. I do believe that they can go on and make a difference on our
Yeah.
planet.
Can
In
you
gen
show us your existing book?
Mhm.
Since we have talked so much about it for those who are watching. I just don't have my copy handy, or I would do it. So The
This
Silent
is-
Epidemic, a child psychiatrist's journey beyond death row.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we've talked several times and we keep saying next time we're going to talk about your book.
We always say that. And, you know, the book itself, I think you and I have talked about a couple of times, you know, why I wrote it and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
how it got to be. And we've talked about the Cliff Notes version of it, you
Yeah.
know, throughout all of our sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a way for me to put down on paper everything that I've learned over my lifetime of trying to put this issue forward. And I've given a copy of it to
On my
Koob,
bookshelf right
Dr.
now.
Koob, who is the NIAAA, you know,
Awesome.
director. You know,
Yeah.
I've sent copies to the former Surgeon General, you know,
Mhm.
which then you get a little memo back from his, you know, I don't know, underling saying, oh yeah, we'll put it in the library over here. And it's like, I don't want the book going on a shelf. I
Mhm.
actually passed out condoms for our Better Safe Than Sorry project in 2015 at or 2016, January 2016, on the Senate floor of the state Senate of Maryland. And I also
Mhm.
passed them out 2014, I believe it was, on the town hall meeting of the National Institutes on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And I'm probably the first person in either venue to pass out condoms. And people will know me for that.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm trying to get my name out. I don't care. It's not my name. My name is a dime a dozen. Believe it or not, we have
Yeah.
2 of us here in Montgomery County. I had 3 going to my dentist in North Carolina in High Point when I was in high school. We all 3 showed up at the dentist at the same time. My name is not important. I've got doppelgangers all over the place.
Yeah.
It's really this issue. Prenatal
Yeah.
alcohol exposure is
Mhm.
not very well understood. It's
Right.
a preconceptional issue. It's a women's rights issue. It's a right to life. It's a child's right. It is a
Yeah.
pro-choice issue.
Yeah.
It crosses all political boundaries.
Yep.
It is a bipartisan issue. It is a human rights
Yes.
issue.
Yes. Yes.
And so why I am talking so fervently about this is that we do need to protect the next generations.
Mhm.
Our
Yeah.
children are our future, and we need to protect them at all costs. And you can quote me on that one
Yeah.
because I've said that all the way back to my master's thesis in 1993. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so in order to be better safe than sorry, we need to preconcept or we use conception if we're going to use alcohol.
Use
Period.
contraception
Full
if you're
stop.
going to use alcohol.
Contracept. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Unless
with
you're no longer of childbearing potential.
and with that, we really need to wrap things up. We've been going for over an hour at this point. Time has flown as it always has. Excuse me. So for those of you who are watching or listening, thank you for taking time out of your day or taking us with you as you do other things. Either way, I'm grateful to have you as part of my weekly audience. And I hope you'll come back next Monday for another episode of Living with FASD. If you would like to suggest topics or have questions that you would like me to explore, or if you have a guest in mind that you think would be a really cool guest to have on the show, then drop me an email at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. You can also join the community at patreon.com/livingwithfasd podcast. And membership, just like the podcast, membership is free. However, you can upgrade, so to speak, to a $5, $10, or $15 a month level, which even at the highest level is less than what you would spend on 1 cup of coffee a week, or a month rather. So doing that will help me pay for all the programs that gets this podcast out to you week after week. So thank you for your support. Please remember to like and share. And because this will be airing before October 1st, please, please, please go to womeninpodcasting.net/ okay, /category/society/ and vote for Living with FASD. And that way, because the more visibility any podcast has, the more people will listen, the more people find out about it. And in the case of Living with FASD, that means the more people will learn about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders and get this information that's not being taught in our schools. So again, that's womeninpodcasting.net /category/society/. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful week and we'll see you next Monday. Thank you, ladies, for joining me.
Thank you, Patty, for having
Thank
us.
you so
Looking
much.
forward to
It's been
talking to
such
you
a
soon.
pleasure.